Before we dive into the episode, make sure you hit subscribe on the podcast platform you're listening on. Also, follow me on X at The Dave Dynasty and subscribe on YouTube by looking up Nostalgic Dave Dynasty. You can also buy one of my shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com/The Dave Dynasty. Now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to 1 hour of the toughest, roughest wrestling you'll ever see.
That's right, Dick the Bruiser said it all.
The big question, have you got the endurance? Have you got the brains to get past the excellence of execution?
The reason why Axe and myself were put on this earth is to demolish people.
Bobby Heenan is a very good-looking sport coat you've got on.
Yeah, and I paid for mine. Mine isn't government issue.
Hello, everybody. Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside. And by golly, we're ready to go with another big week of championship wrestling.
Greetings, wrestling fans, and welcome to Wrestling Nostalgia. I am your host, Dave Dynasty. Thank you for joining me, and on this episode, my guest is Ross Hart from the famous Calgary Hart family. We talk about his family, his career, Stampede Wrestling, the famous British Bulldog split up the world never saw, and much more. And that interview's coming up very, very soon. For those of you who have been asking, there will be more AWA and Calgary 1988 deep dive episodes coming, so stay tuned for those. If you follow me on social media, you did see that on the future Calgary 88 deep dive episodes, I will be joined by Abu Wizal, who was a manager in Stampede at that time. He's going to give me his insight, his firsthand stories and tellings of things as we discuss the month. So that should be wonderfully entertaining and fun and insightful. Hey guys, Christmas is fast approaching. It's almost here. So be sure to go and buy the wrestling fans on your shopping list a Wrestling Nostalgia shirt. We've got several designs you can choose from, so there's something for everyone. Or you can just go and buy yourself a Christmas present. That's cool. That's okay. Nobody cares. You're entitled. So go to ProWrestlingTees.com/The Dave Dynasty and finish your gift shopping today. All right, let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll have my guest, Ross Hart. Filsinger Games is a tabletop cards and dice game company that has enjoyed success for over 3 decades. Their first game was Champions of the Galaxy and was released in 1986. Champions of the Galaxy is a tabletop game that features professional wrestling over 100 years in the future. Humans, aliens, and monsters battle in the Galactic Wrestling Federation for belts. Legends of Wrestling features officially licensed wrestling cards featuring stars like Ted DiBiase, Jimmy Snuka, Harley Race, and many, many more, including game sets for independent promotions. Each match takes place in real time. The action is fast and furious, and all the things that happen in pro wrestling, like cage matches, outside interference, 3-man tag matches, they also happen in the games. You have the opportunity to run your own wrestling promotion involving either real life stars or fictional characters of the future, or you can mix and match both. Visit filsingergames.com for more information and to order the games today. That is Filsinger Games, FILSINGERGAMES.com to order now. This is Listen to Their Screams, a horror podcast that feels like you're chatting with friends. Hello, I am one of your friends, Dave. I am one of the co-hosts of Listen to Their Screams with my friend Ike, and we want you to come and check us out. We are a fun-filled, positive horror movie podcast that does reviews, news, birthdays, anniversaries. We play games. We are a ton of fun every week for you, the horror fan out there. For all of our links to our social media and the podcast platforms, just check out our link tree. It is linktr.ee/listen2screams. That is listen, the number 2 and screams. Or look us up on your favorite social media platform and podcast provider. All right, and welcome back to Wrestling Nostalgia. This time I'm being joined by a member of the Hart Dynasty, Ross Hart. Ross, how are you?
Great, Dave. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, I appreciate it. It's man, it's something else. I've talked to your brother Bruce. I've interviewed him before, and it's an honor because they say you're the family historian. You're the guy that knows everything. It's
I suppose, I've probably forgotten more than I remember, but yeah.
Well, that's all right. That's all right. I'm sure you've got plenty of stories.
I'll take that role anytime. Yeah, it gives me a lot of great memories.
Of course, yeah, and of course you're from a very big family, and you're the second youngest, correct? Just
second youngest of the sons, third youngest in the family. So my sister Diana was younger than me, and then obviously Owen was younger than me. So I'm the 10th son and the 7th out of 8. No, I'm the 10th child, I should say, and then I'm the 7th son out of 8.
Yeah, and we've all, I mean, anybody that's a wrestling fan has heard all the crazy stories about the Hart household, and tell us from a guy that was there, that grew up in it. What was it as crazy growing up in this huge wrestling family and in the Hart Mansion as everybody talks about?
It was never dull. It was amazing how much took place there. We had 12 kids and, a lot of neighbors, and friends that would come over. But it was so many things all under one household. With my parents' business, with the wrestling and phone calls coming all the time from other promoters and wrestlers wanting to get booked for my dad, and then just other existing wrestlers who were working for Stampede at the time calling to arrange to meet their rides or get their bookings for shows. So you had all that activity going on in the office there, and then with the 12 different kids and all the different activities there. My 4 sisters, who kind of did their own thing. They weren't as involved with the wrestling. They didn't go to the shows with my mom. They would stay at home when the boys all went to the Friday night wrestling shows at the Pavilion with my dad. So we almost had two existences there with my sisters who would do things with my mom, on Fridays and weekends when my dad was away. And then the boys that would go to the wrestling shows with my dad and do everything from selling programs to working at the ticket sections and setting up the rings and selling programs, doing all those things. So, but the household was amazing, and it was such a big house, right? It was 5 stories. So, and a lot of cats and dogs there. So there was just so many different activities going on, people making meals at different times, different activities going on. Sometimes my dad working out in the dungeon, with aspiring wrestlers. The TV always on, there's just so much activity, and sometimes a little chaotic, but I think my parents did an amazing job raising 12 kids under one roof, and getting us all to school and making sure we were all fed and running a family business out of it. Yeah.
I mean, man, with all the wrestlers in and out and all you children and your larger than life father and everything, your mom, I think she should have deserved sainthood. I can't imagine what she had to have been. She absolutely had to have been a gem of a woman to put up with all that.
just amazing. My mom, she was grammatically sound. She was very well educated. She went to college in New York and was a business secretary, and she could type like 170 words a minute, I think. Just amazing. She could do shorthand, and she did all of my dad's bookkeeping and tax returns for the wrestling. Managed all of that. And still made sure that her kids were well raised, and that we got to school every day. So she was just amazing, and yet really didn't want to be too much part of the wrestling. She had relationships with a lot of the wrestlers whenever they phoned to speak to my dad. They would always speak to my mom first and have a very cordial greeting with her, and she knew the wrestlers on a first name basis. And any wrestling fans who called up or members of the media would always speak with my mom. She was secretary and kind of the PR chairperson for my dad's business. Yet she didn't go to the wrestling shows. She didn't want to be actually part of the scene at the live shows. She was, I guess, just a little more reserved, a little more elegant, and really didn't even watch the shows on TV. And yet she had a very special relationship with all the wrestlers, and kind of the softer side of the business relationship with my mom and dad. And my dad could sometimes be gruff and businesslike with the wrestlers or the boys. My mom was definitely the softer side of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got to have that balance, and a lot of people. I mean, let's dig into you a little bit, right? Your middle name is Lindsay.
That's right.
And they say that that's because of your dad's longtime friend Luther Lindsay, and who was a good friend of your father's and everything else. So I mean, besides your family, you got wrestling roots right there in the name. Not only your last name, but gaining your middle name from Luther Lindsay.
It was amazing. My dad had a really special relationship with Luther Lindsay and George Gordienko. My dad actually kind of broke them in and taught them submission wrestling, and they became so skilled, that they could rival my dad actually, and they became very competitive in these sessions, sometimes 3-4 hours in the basement in the dungeon. And Luther was just an incredible athlete. He was incredibly fast, and he had so much strength. He had played football, I think, and George had a lot of bulk strength and was a really good submission wrestler. But anyway, it was kind of an honor that I was named after Luther, because my dad had such a special relationship with him, and they became close friends after he'd wrestled here. I don't know if he actually broke in from my dad, but he learned a lot from my dad. But he learned a lot of submission and amateur wrestling, and he took that wherever he went with him. He became a pretty big star in Portland and the Carolinas, and he would come back and wrestle for my dad over the years. So I always felt it was an honor that I was named after him, that my middle name was.
Yeah, and Luther. I mean, so many guys. And Luther being one of them, is lost to the annals of time because, he's not, didn't hit that boom in the 80s when everybody was watching wrestling. So it's like, but Luther, man, was a great wrestler for his time. And just there's so many of those guys that, kind of predate that video age that kind of get lost in the shuffle sometimes. And then not only that, but your godfather was Jack Pfeffer. And did you know Jack Pfeffer? Did you get to know him very well?
I don't know if I ever met him. If I did, maybe it was like when I was a baby, but I don't know if he actually was ever in Calgary. But I think my dad had come across him and maybe even wrestled for him in New York in the late 40s. And I think my dad had kind of a special relationship with Jack, and then they used to correspond, and I saw some letters. In fact, I saw the letter in which my dad asked Jack if he would be godfather to me, when I was born in 1960. So, he was an interesting character. He
definitely
certainly had an impact on wrestling in New York. More, it was more of the carnival type wrestling, but he did quite well. Him and guys like Tony Santos kind of did their own thing and ran their own shows in the smaller arenas, and were kind of rivals to Vince McMahon and the WWF at that time. But they certainly had an identity of their own, and they broke in some pretty big names. I think like Pat Patterson and Wild Bull Curry and a few other wrestlers. I think Ronnie Dupree all got their start with Jack Pfeffer, Tony Santos, and those promotions in New York and New England.
Yeah, I mean, so many people when they talk Jack Pfeffer, all they mention is the copycat wrestlers, right? With the names and you hear that all the time, but they don't mention. I mean, Jack Pfeffer was such a precursor to the modern quote unquote sports entertainment, and he was a lot of what McMahon did in the 80s. Pfeffer was kind of laying the roots of much earlier. And that kind of gets lost in time sometimes when people it's like they pick and choose what they remember about guys.
Yeah,
And,
I'm kind of liking it, Dave, to when Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage had left WWE and gone to WCW, and then Vince created those characters also for Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. There's the fake people and and Razor Ramon, and then previously the Huckster and Nacho Man Randy Savage, and that was chapter right out of Jake Pfeffer's style promoting, because he did that, and I think he did it just for amusement, really just to piss off some of the established promoters and maybe wrestlers that didn't want to work for him. And I don't think he took it too seriously, but and it didn't seem to hurt his business too much.
No. He certainly understood marketing.
Do well on his own, yeah. But it was interesting. I think Vince definitely learned some tricks of the trade from Jack.
Yeah, I agree. And but before we go any further, I got to ask, because so many people, including many of your brothers, they do a spot-on impersonation of your father, Stu. Do you have an impression of Stu that you do? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I can do one. There was a kind of a scenario one time. It was with Cowboy Lang. He was a midget wrestler. He was from Rimbey, Alberta, which was about 120 miles from Calgary. And I think he got his start with Lord Littlebrook in Missouri. And Cowboy was pretty good worker, but he was very serious about the business too. At times he didn't like the distinction of being a midget wrestler or a gimmick type wrestler. He took his role very seriously. Even though the midgets had to do a lot of comedy spots and things like that. But
sure.
But he was wrestling Little Tokyo, who was a pretty established star. He was actually Little Brook's world champion for quite a few years. I don't think he ever actually lost the title. I think he retired with it. And Tokyo was a pretty good shooter, very serious about his craft, But anyway, Cowboy was working with him in Calgary, and they did a title change where Tokyo dropped the title to Cowboy Lang in Calgary. And it was such a special moment for Cowboy, because it was practically his home audience, because Calgary was the closest major city to Rimbey, which was a very small community. And he was basking in his glory after he'd won the title, and wrestlers all brought champagne and showered him with it in the ring. And he was enjoying every moment of it. But at the same time, there was another event going on in one of the other buildings adjacent to the pavilion in the Stampede grounds, and it was this chimp that had starred in those movies with Clint Eastwood. Every which way. I don't know what that chimp's name, but I think
Clyde
it had been in some movies. But anyway, it was actually appearing at one of the trade shows, at another event. It was sort of like a Comic-Con or something like that.
Yeah.
And so they brought the chimp over to the pavilion where the wrestling show was. And my dad picked up on this right away, and he said, well, this would be great. I could get a photo opportunity with Cowboy and the chimp. And so I think my brother Bruce got wind of this quickly, and Cowboy wasn't quite aware of it yet. He was still enjoying his celebration with the title and, getting pictures taken and everything. And then Bruce came up to Cowboy, and I think a couple of other wrestlers were in on it, and said, Cowboy, did you see the chimp? And he says, yeah, I saw the chimp there. And he said, Stu wants you to drop the belt to him. I said, what? He said, Stu wants you to actually go in the ring and drop the belt to the chimp. And Cowboy fell for this, and this was like back in 1980. And he says, what the hell? He says, I just won it from Little Tokyo, one of the toughest midgets in the world. And Stu wants me to go in there and lay down for that chimp. And Bruce said, yeah, Stu just thinks it would be good for business and good for PR. Anyway, and Cowboy said, well, that's the fucking shits. He said, I can't do that. And he says, that'll just kill the business. It'll kill the title. And anyway, so my dad finally caught up with Cowboy and said, Cowboy say, can I see you? I want to do something with you and the chimp. And all my dad wanted was Cowboy to take a picture with him. You know, it was just sort of a photo opportunity. Two small beings. And Cowboy says, I ain't doing it, Stu. He says, I ain't doing it. And my dad said, what? He says, I ain't doing it. He says, I ain't putting the chimp over or something like that. My dad had no idea what he was talking about. So why the hell was he being so reluctant? This would be such great publicity. And says, what the hell are you talking about? He said to Cowboy, he says, I ain't fucking putting the chimp over. There's just no way. He says, it'll kill the business. And my dad was so pissed off. He says, do whatever you want then, you little shit, you know, and that was it, you know, no photo opportunity or anything. My dad just said he gave up on the idea, but he was so mad at Cowboy Lang, you know, so, and Stu had no idea, you know, that Cowboy had been told he had to drop the belt he had just won to the chimp, and Cowboy actually thought Stu was wanting him to take a dive for the chimp, and so that was one of my funny recollections, you know, of my dad. And of course, my dad was hard of hearing because he had the cauliflower ears. So sometimes he'd pick up on things and he would stutter and repeat himself and say the same things over and over again. So, you know, there were a lot of guys that mocked and imitated my dad, but they always respected him very genuinely.
Oh, yeah.
He was a very tough man, and they were pretty discreet about how they did that. You know, they usually impersonated him behind his back, but usually not in front of him because he wasn't too amused with that.
Yeah, I've always said that being a lifelong fan of professional wrestling has helped me with geography and other things like that because of where, you know, the hometowns of guys where they're billed from. But I've always said that I'll like watch a show or a movie and I'll hear a guy and I'll say, oh, that guy's got to be from Western Canada because he sounds like a member of the Hart family with that accent. So it's like you can pick up on stuff like that. And for us Americans, it's, you know, that's kind of stuff we pick up on. And like you said, I mean, Stampede, right? You mentioned earlier, it was a family business, right? You sold programs and did whatever as a young child. You were childhood friends with several guys like Abu Weasel, who later became a manager in Stampede, and guys like that. And then as a kid, I'm sure you heard your father training guys down in the dungeon. When it got to the point, was it expected that all of you guys would at some point become wrestlers, or was that pressure not there? Pressure is a weird word, but I mean, was it expected that, hey, at some point you guys will fall into the family business and you'll wrestle, or was it kind of left to your own devices?
I'd say it was definitely left to our own devices. My dad and my mom really encouraged us all to get a good education, and they knew the wrestling industry could be up and down, could be very volatile. You know, at times it could be doing great business. You could make a lot of money from it, and then there are other times that it was just a financial pit. You know, and we were losing money. You know, hand over fist. So it was a pretty volatile industry. So my parents both, encouraged all of us to get an education, go into law or teaching or financial management or something. But it seemed like we were all kind of drawn into wrestling because we were so involved with it. You know, it just seemed a matter of time if we were setting up rings and refereeing and collecting the gate proceeds at the spot shows, you know, out of town, that we would be introduced to wrestling. So a lot of us were refereeing first, and that was such a great way to get introduced to wrestling because you would see the match unfold, and you would see the communication that went on between two wrestlers in the ring and calling their spots, and the referee calling the time to them, especially if it was a televised match. And it was a great way to kind of learn the ins and outs of wrestling and be introduced to actually performing in the ring. So you know, my dad didn't stop us from doing that. You know, he said, if you want to do that, that's fine. But, you know, you have to kind of earn your place in the card. And my dad was pretty, I'd say he was pretty fair on the way he treated wrestlers. He didn't give his kids preferential treatment. You know, you know, if you started out, you had to put guys over, you had to learn from experienced guys. And, you know, he wasn't like some of these promoters who are trying to push kids down the fans' throats and get them over no matter what. In my dad's eyes, you kind of started from the bottom, and if you progressed and you learned, then he would use you accordingly. And I think in Brett's and Owen's cases, especially, they learned so well and they rapidly advanced, but they were wrestling with such good stars. They learned from such great veterans like Leo Burke and Hito and Sakurada, and in Owen's case, I think Makan Singh and Gamma Singh, and some really good experienced heels, that you could learn from. And so they were well used. They were put over, but I'd say they deserved to be, because they were box office attractions. They were having great matches, and they had earned their spots.
Yeah, and I mentioned Abu Weasel. Let's circle back to him, because you were a childhood friend of his, and a lot of people don't know Abu, but he was a great manager for Stampede in the later years. But he, as a young guy, was right. You were friends with him, and he was helping you to sell the programs and was trying to get involved in the business and stuff. Tell us a little bit about Abu.
Malad Zain is his real name. He was the exact same age as me. And he used to come to the matches on Friday nights. I don't know I think maybe he came with his dad or something to the shows. And I kind of just developed a friendship with him when I was about 12, 13 years old. And we hung out together, and he helped me sell programs. And we kind of had a friendship because we were the same age. And we even competed in the same city amateur wrestling championship. I think when we were in grade 9, we were in the same weight class, and I didn't actually get to wrestle him. He got eliminated by 2 guys that I had beaten, but we were in the same class, the same weight division and everything, and we wrestled in the city tournament together. But and then we stayed good friends over the years, Malad and I, and then at some stage, I think he had probably thought about going into wrestling, but he was a little on the short side. So my brother Bruce recruited him to be a kind of evil Middle East manager of the Karachi Vice with Makan Singh and Gamma Singh, and he got over great, in that role. Just sort of as the sneaky, manipulative manager that was always interfering or distracting the referee. While the heels were getting away with murder, and he became kind of a staple commodity of the Karachi Vice.
Yeah, I've talked to about Abu several times online, through Messenger and things, and he's such a great guy and loves just such a great love for wrestling. And the Karachi Vice, man, I tell you what, they are so underappreciated. I know people always talk about Bastian Booger and Norman the Lunatic, but if they could have seen Mike Shaw doing Makan Singh, he was such a talented guy when put in the right role, and such a great heel.
Mike's greatest strength was his interviews, his talking. Right?
Yeah.
He had the gift of the gab, and that's unfortunately what was left out when he was Norman or Bastian Booger. And just kind of. In a farcical role, but as sort of the big overweight loudmouth bully, that was very critical of his opponents and the fans. He was just amazing, and very impressive guy in the ring. Like he was probably 350 pounds, but he had amazing agility and quickness. Like some of the spots he did with my brother Owen and Brian Pillman and Chris Benoit were just amazing for a guy. He had really good psychology, but he always knew what to say in interviews, and he never went overboard or went too far. You would always insult the fans as sort of low-class laborers and minimum wage types and welfare cases, which was true, I guess, in a lot of cases. But he knew not to go overboard with that. He would never say anything that was homophobic or racist or anything like that. He was great, and just always good spokesperson. If we asked Makan or Mike to do an interview on national TV or radio, even at like 6 a.m. on some AM talk show in the morning, he would do it. It was just amazing. one funny occasion is when he was doing an interview. I think it was in Kamloops, BC, for a big show we had out there, and the announcer told Muckin that they had just 20 minutes to speak with him because the Prime Minister Brian Mulroney was doing a press conference at 10:30 to talk about the national budget. And so they told Mike we were going to have to keep this short because we're doing this live telecast of the Prime Minister's speech. And Mike was fine with that. And I guess Mike started around 10 o'clock. And it became such an engaging conversation live on the radio. They just kept it going, and they preempted the Prime Minister's speech until Mike's speech was over. And I think Mike talked for about 2 hours, and there were so many fans and radio listeners calling up, and it was just amazing, and it was it was very engaging. Like even though he was putting a lot of the baby faces like Owen and Pillman down, and criticizing the fans, for not seeing what a great talent he was. He was so engaging. He was colorful and controversial to listen to, and there were so many followers calling in. They said we have to just keep this going, and they preempted the Prime Minister's speech until Muckin Singh was finished 2 hours later.
Yeah, and it's funny because obviously everybody knows how special Owen was, right, as a talent. But a baby face only gets over. I mean, there has to be that great heel to counter that baby face to get to that next level. And for Owen in Stampede, Muckin was that heel that helped push Owen to that next level. For every, I mean, again, I'm not undermining Owen's talent or abilities at all, but Muckin just added a whole nother layer to help getting Owen over as a babyface because he was such a great heel.
Yeah, it was sort of like the David versus Goliath theme, right? Muckin was larger. He was a cheater. He was a bully, and Owen was smaller but more agility and more sympathetic, obviously. And it was a great storyline, and they had some incredible matches. And I think Muckin deserved a lot of credit for Owen's development as a wrestler, because Owen probably had some of his greatest matches working against him, and that says a lot considering he had such great matches with a lot of lighter guys, a lot of cruiserweights, like the Viet Cong Express and Kichi Yamada, or Jushin Liger in Japan, and Kuniaki Kobayashi and Hiro Saito. And Owen was just having incredible matches with these junior heavyweights, and yet some of his very best matches were against the likes of Muckin Singh.
Yep, absolutely. So going back, when you started training, let's talk about that. Did you approach Stu and tell him that you wanted to start? And when you started training, did you train with Stu mostly, or your brothers, or was it both? Or tell me how that works in your family dynamic.
I didn't really approach my dad. I just sort of, I guess, waited for my spot. And I think I kind of broke in with Owen, actually, when we were in Europe. We went on a vacation there. Owen at the time was going to university, and I was taking a semester off from university to travel to Europe. I went to Germany and Austria and Hungary, and actually wrestled in Austria and Hungary, and then met up with Owen in Germany, and then we flew together to Britain and worked for joint promotions there. I think we worked there for about a month. And then I went back and I finished my university, and Owen was continuing in university. I think he was going to study to be a teacher like I had become, and our brothers Bruce and Keith were teachers as well. But I actually trained, I had worked out with my dad a number of times. My dad would work out with us in the dungeon, and sometimes we look forward to the opportunity just to learn from my dad, because we earned his respect and a level of toughness, if we actually put through the ringer with his submission holds, like a thread through or a double grapevine, and he would show us these moves, and these were great submission holds to learn ourselves. So I worked out with my dad whenever I got an opportunity, and I think all of us did, and we were better for it. But when I actually kind of broke in with with wrestling. So, I had that initial stint in Europe, but then I trained more seriously with my brother, Bruce. Bruce was one of the best teachers in the industry. He was such a good instructor, such a good communicator. He knew so much about psychology and really taught the essential basics, how to lock up, how to take bumps, how to go into the ropes, how to sell, how to engage the crowd, with your facial expressions and body language. I don't think I've ever seen a better teacher than Bruce. So and Owen and I kind of worked out with him. I think it was in the summer of '85, and my dad had already sold out Stampede Wrestling to the WWF in 1984, and then when they weren't drawing very well, and then the crowds became smaller and smaller, and the fans weren't adapting to the WWF style, my dad decided to restart Stampede, and he started in the fall of '85, and that was pretty tough because we had lost the British Bulldogs, the Hart Foundation, all of our big stars, Honky Tonk Man. So many of all our big stars had gone on to Stampede, and my dad had to kind of recreate a new stable of stars, and Owen was an essential part of that. Owen, Chris Benoit, Brian Pillman, kind of gave Bruce reignition as well. He tag teamed with Brian Pillman, his Bad Company, and then we brought in the Viet Cong Express from Japan, and some other big names, and so it was great. But so I think my training with Bruce was what I best learned from, and Bruce ran a really good camp, and then a few years later he established the Hart Brothers training camp, and that's where he brought in Brian Pillman and Biff Wellington and quite a few others, and he ran it with my brother Keith. So I was certainly around Bruce enough, that I learned so many tricks of the trade with him, but I didn't really wrestle full time ever. I followed my parents' advice and got my teaching degree, but I would wrestle sometimes on spot shows or out of town, just because the opportunity was there, and it was great, and yet I never really had any serious aspirations to be a big name or rival Brett or Bruce or anyone like that. I knew more of my strength was behind the scenes with writing the programs, developing the TV show, working in other areas of the promotion that were probably just as essential as the in-ring talent.
Sure. Yeah. And you talked about around '85 when the WWE had bought Stampede and it came back to Stu. Your brother Brett has always said that Vince never paid Stu. That he always stiffed Stu. Is that true? I mean,
Absolutely.
That's kind of the Vince McMahon way, I guess.
Yeah, I think he had made a $50,000 down payment when he bought the promotion from my dad, and with that, that gave him all the TV rights to Stampede Wrestling for our entire market, which included pretty much all of Canada at that time. So he got all our TV spots. He also got my dad's rings. He got about 5 or 6 of my dad's rings. And access to his best talent. He got the Bulldogs and the Hart Foundation. And that was the only payment he ever made. And then, he kind of promised my dad that he would catch up with him and extend the payments, and he never did. He only made that one initial payment. And, when my dad restarted the promotion, a year later, I guess, in the fall of '85, and that's after WWE wasn't drawing well, and they hadn't captured the imagination of the fans. And, it really wasn't until I think after WrestleMania that they finally got established everywhere, in Canada and the States. So that my dad decided to kind of kickstart the industry again and restart the promotion. So I think Vince, on the premise that my dad restarted the promotion in '85, felt he wasn't obligated to pay the balance, which was supposed to be like I think $1 million and 3% of all the live gates, and he never honored his agreement in any of those areas. And I think his feeling was Stu was was not going to contest that now because, I'm already employing his son and son-in-law, Jim Neidhart, and the Bulldogs, and giving them a pretty good push. And my dad kind of never pursued it, he did a lot to pave the way for WWF to take over the Stampede market here. And and unfortunately, we weren't compensated very fairly by the WWF.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, right? You mentioned earlier, right? It was Stu brought back Stampede around 85, right? Bruce was put more in charge, right? The booking and everything else. And while WWE had a lot of the previous talent, there was an influx of some great talent during this run, right? With Owen and Brian Pillman, Chris Benoit, Johnny Smith, and more. And I always say that Bruce is very underappreciated for his stuff, because he did have a very I don't even know how to describe it, a very modern. He knew where wrestling was and where it was going. Had a very modern style of booking, and this period of Stampede was, to me, was very, very hot, very engaging, and like you said, a lot of that I think falls back on Bruce and his vision, and I think, for someone, right, just regaining that territory, having all their top talent taken from them, it's wild at this time period that I think Bruce did a great job with the talent he had, and really reinvigorated Stampede for this run in the mid to late 80s.
Yeah, absolutely. Bruce doesn't get a lot of credit sometimes, for the guys he developed, and the great business that he brought. Some of his ideas were just phenomenal. He could take some raw talent and really get them over. He always had a pulse of what was going to get over. Sometimes with managers and valets, and sometimes because exploiting ethnicities. Like the Karachi Vice, right? With Muck and Singh and Gamma Singh, because there was always this idea that people from the Middle East were anti-Western, anti-Canadian, and so he kind of turned Gamma Singh, who was just a East Indian, who had been a kind of an undercard babyface for years, into a villain, and changed his billing from India to Pakistan, to Karachi, Pakistan, and that just became an instant magnet for heat, and wearing the turban, and then converted Muck and Singh, to Islam as well, right? and it was great, and Bruce did so much. He helped wrestlers with their interview skills, their appearances, always protecting their images, and just had a wealth of knowledge, and was always just sort of on the cutting edge of what was going to get over with fans, and the pulse of the industry. He had so much influence even on guys like Honky Tonk Man and Bad News Allen, who were pretty established veterans, but they learned so much, I think, from Bruce. Bruce did a lot to get them over, and I think improve their speaking abilities and get their gimmicks over, and Bruce just had great versatility, in developing guys, with the variety of sizes and styles and backgrounds.
Yeah, I agree. I always think Bruce had a great mind for wrestling, and best, you hear about it later with Paul Heyman. I think Bruce had that. He knew how to best utilize guys and utilize their strengths and whatever else. Now, there's always been talk that during this period that there were some issues between Bruce and Ed Whalen, and that they butted heads quite a bit. Was this true? And did some of this stem back to the whole issue years earlier with Bad News Allen and Stomper that Ed Whalen took issue to? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was an angle that's just got over incredibly, but it was too surreal, I guess, for Ed Whalen. Ed was a pro babyface commentator. He always had
a bit of a Mark side.
Always rooted for the baby faces, and sometimes Ed would get so wound up, with the heat that, the villains were getting and what they were getting away with. And there was a lot of tension between him and Bad News Allen. I think it was kind of racial tension almost. Allen didn't think Ed respected wrestlers enough and didn't know his role as a commentator or TV announcer. And, Ed was larger than life. He was sports commentator recognized all over Alberta and Western Canada. And he was the host of the Calgary Flames hockey games. And he'd been the voice of Stampede Wrestling for so many years. And Allen was quite intimidating with him. And there was definitely some tension, pre-existing tension that was there. And quite often Ed was turned off by Allen using a fork or, bloodying up guys in the ring. And for him, it was just too overboard. It was getting way too much heat. And I think he felt it reflected negatively on his image, as an announcer of the show. But so when they did this angle where Bad News had turned on the Stomper, and supposedly, Bad News and Kerry Brown had broken Jeff Goldie's neck. I think Kerry Brown had pile drived Jeff Goldie into the concrete, and then Bad News attacked the Stomper with a fork. And the place just went nuts. There's just incredible heat, but the fans were almost all rioting in the arena. There was fans. It was almost like panic had formed with all the fans. People were running left and right. Chairs kind of flying everywhere, and there was just this incredible heat. When the Stomper went berserk about what had happened to his son, and it was just incredible heat. But Ed had thought it had just gone too far. He was. It was so realistic. There was so much tension, in the building there, and he gave his resignation that day. And Bruce, because he had kind of orchestrated the angle, but I don't think he had told Bad News to go as far as he did. Unfortunately, Allen carried things too far. And after the angle was shot, he was out fighting with fans in the crowd. He had some old man had hit him with his cane, and Bad News grabbed the guy by his head and assaulted him. And some other fan had tripped on a chair and fallen and broken their legs. So this was all bait for the Boxing and Wrestling Commission to suspend my dad's license. And they had kind of a vendetta against my dad because they thought wrestling had become too violent and out of control. And I think a lot of it was just sort of jealousy that the business had been so good and my dad was selling out regularly. So they sort of had a agenda to, put my dad out of business, and that's what they did. So they ended up suspending Bad News Allen for an indefinite period of time and suspending my dad's license. And it was just so unfortunate because the next week when the Stomper was supposed to fight Bad News at the Pavilion in Calgary, it was minus 36-degree weather and a snowstorm, and there were 2,500 fans lined up outside the pavilion to get in to see the show. But the commission that same day had revoked my dad's license and said he wasn't allowed to promote in Calgary. And it just kind of killed our business. It just killed all our momentum. And with Ed's resignation on the show as well, and a lot of the negative media coverage from the newspapers and reporters, that wrestling was too violent and had become too out of control. Bruce got a lot of the backlash for that. And I don't think that was deserved. I think in a lot of cases, the wrestlers overextended what they were doing in the ring. And because of that, Bruce kind of took the fall for the fallout from it.
Yeah, and some of this tension between Bruce and Ed kind of spilled over into '89 with one of the best Stampede angles that was never really seen when the British Bulldog split. And the talk has always been that Ed was a huge British Bulldog fan, and they split up in '89, but that the footage was severely edited for TV and never fully aired. And people say that a lot of that fell back on Ed Whalen. Is that correct?
I think to an extent, I don't think Ed really approved of the angle. He he had been a big fan of Dynamite and Davey, who had been baby faces for so long. But I think Ed had become kind of turned off by a lot of the angles, and I guess it was a case where sometimes you need to get your heels heat, they need to get away with some things in order to create interest. There has to be some kind of a need for baby faces to get their revenge and their just reward, and get revenge against the Karachi Vice or whoever, who whichever heels there were, years earlier. It would have been, J.R. Foley's army, but and I think Ed had just become kind of turned off on the direction of wrestling. He'd become so babyface oriented, and quite often it reflected in his interviews, and he would he wouldn't let wrestlers get their heat sometimes. He would yank the mic away from them if they had gone over 2 minutes, or if he didn't like what they were saying, and I think a lot of that was from the initial tension with Bad News Allen before, and definitely he and Bruce weren't on the same page, on the creative side, and Bruce was really trying to get angles over and trying to generate some heat, but it didn't go well, with Ed's vision of just a very family based show, where nothing's too extreme or too far gone, and yet sometimes you have to do things that are a little controversial or that gets heat. Otherwise, there's no reaction to it. And especially at the time we were competing with the WWE and losing a lot of our best stars to them, we had to sometimes get imaginative or creative. There's another time Bruce had come up with a role. There's a guy named Ben Ryan who would come in as a manager, and Bruce had come up with this idea of him becoming Hugh Hart, and he was billing himself as a illegitimate son of promoter Stu Hart, and it was funny, it's such a play on words, and of course, most fans didn't take him seriously. There's no way that he was Stu's bastard son, and even my dad wasn't very happy with that, and I think Bruce by this stage was kind of doing a lot of things maybe without my dad's blessing or approval, and my dad was very traditional, very old school, and he was offended by it, and anyway, Ed didn't like it at all, and he just went out of his way to censor this guy and not let him speak or get his heat, and threatening him with the mic, and the role was kind of killed, and yet it probably could have gotten over very well, like if there's some rivalry with him and say Owen and Bruce, because he was carrying on as an illegitimate son of Stu, which there's no truth to, but it was a little too close to home, for guys like Ed and even my dad.
Yeah. And in '89, this run of Stampede kind of shut down, and lots of people talk about, the editing of angles and the Ed Whalen influence. So, from your inside opinion, what happened with Stampede shutting down in '89?
I think it was a case where a lot of our top talent we couldn't hang on to anymore. There's just too many opportunities for guys to go to the WWF or WCW or work Japan frequently. Owen had actually signed with the WWF in 1988 as the Blue Blazer, and it was really hard to replace Owen. He'd been our top star for so many years. Chris Benoit was wrestling a lot in Japan. Brian Pillman had signed with WCW. Bad News Allen had joined the WWF.
Mock and Singh had moved on.
And our TV show just couldn't match the production value of WWF or a lot of the other shows, and the costs just became too high for us. And and I think it was kind of the end of the road there. And there are some other things that were going on. The TV show had been badly mismanaged. There's a fellow that had taken over the production of the TV show, and he didn't do a very good job with that, and he basically controlled all the placements of Stampede, in different cities. And all of a sudden, with this new arrangement he made with different TV stations in Western Canada, we had lost our TV spots in a lot of our prime markets, and we no longer had TV coverage, in places in Saskatchewan with this STV network. This fellow named Fred May, who had taken the production of the show, and he had the show on TSN, which was going all across Canada, but we weren't getting any of the proceeds from that. Only he was, right? So I think all those things were factors in Stampede's demise. Just the loss of talent, the lack of production on the TV shows, and I think my dad was weary, and at the time we were just losing so much money, and it was just too hard to compete with the WWE. So we pulled the curtains on the promotion at the end of '89.
Yeah. And lots of people talk about that, right? They talk about, and they say Vince killed the territories, and there's obviously something to that. But there was also a huge degree of just the changing of society, right? And the changing of television to a more, from a regional to a more national level across, right? And especially in the U.S. And by '89, I mean, most of the territories were dying out.
Yeah,
and,
there were very few that were left. I think it was us and maybe Don Owen in Portland, and AWA
probably
was
Memphis,
kind of on its last legs, and maybe Memphis was still going, but basically all the small promoters had gone under, right? And and Stampede was one of the last holdouts. We lasted a lot longer than other promotions.
Yeah, and like you talked about earlier, right? That you didn't really wrestle full time. But I mean, you did make appearances and everything else, but you helped produce a TV. You trained wrestlers. You and Bruce relaunched Stampede in 1989. You and Bruce also started the Stampede Wrestling Hall of Fame. So you've been involved and experienced so many different aspects of the wrestling business. Did you have kind of a favorite side to be involved in when it pertains to the wrestling business?
Oh boy, I think I liked a lot of different roles. I enjoyed doing the TV production, even though it was challenging, because we would film on Friday nights, and we would have to edit the show and have it ready for viewing the next day. Basically, we had like 6-7 hours to get it ready, and it was hard because sometimes we had 3 or 4 hours of footage, and we had to condense that to a 60-minute show, actually 47 minutes with commercials. So it was hard, we had to, and it was just a long process to edit things, and then interject promos for the different markets and the other towns. And it was time consuming, and sometimes I'd be up until 8 or 9 the next morning, just editing the TV show, and then getting a few hours sleep, and then making the trip to Edmonton for our Saturday shows. But it was great seeing some of the angles unfold and some of the best interviews. I remember just some of the classic interviews, that I could see live, and before TV audiences even saw them, with Dr. D, David Schultz, and Archie the Stomper Goldie. Some of these guys, Muck and Singh, some of the best talkers and personalities in the business. Just incredible. These guys were so charismatic, so convincing. So I had a lot of enjoyment with that. I had a lot of enjoyment writing the programs. We used to put them out every week, and that's really where I learned my writing skills and became a pretty successful English teacher. But I learned basically how to write letters and critical responses and essays from writing all the press releases and the articles for the Body Press program every week. So it was kind of interesting, a transferable skill I learned from wrestling, which carried through into my teaching career for over 40 years. And just training guys. I enjoyed doing that very much with Bruce, and helping develop a lot of stars like Harry and my nephew, and Ted and TJ and Natalia, who all went on to become pretty successful names in the industry. And it was nice to have a small part in helping raise and develop them in the industry.
Yeah. It's funny how when you look back with wrestling, how many guys did different things, right? Well, like you said, helping with the programs or helping, whatever it might be, helping in different ways. And how many of those skills guys kind of found their niche in life through other things besides in the ring. And that's kind of unique. And you did make, you made a few appearances for the WWE here and there. But in 1993, there was a Survivor Series team, right, where Brett and Owen were joined by Bruce and Keith on a team. Because you weren't really a full-time wrestler, why were you not included in this?
I think they just wanted 4 guys, and and I think Bruce and Keith, they had more experience. I just sort of yes to them, and I think the idea was they wanted 3 older brothers with Owen, who were really well established, and the idea was that they were a team in the match, and then Owen dropped a fall, and even though the Hart Foundation won, or the Hart family, I guess, Bruce, Brett, and Keith and Owen kind of turned against his family, so it just sort of fit the storyline, where Owen revolted against his older brothers, Bruce and Keith, who he kind of looked up to as father figures, and Brett, maybe, who he had idolized as a wrestler, and it was sort of the transformation of Owen as a heel. So if they had needed another person, I would have gladly done it. If they had a 5-man tag or something, in fact, I think the idea was that if Keith couldn't make it, I would wrestle in his place, because he was firefighting at the time, and he had to get time off to wrestle at that match in Boston. So I got to go to the show, which was great, and watch the match and everything, and really enjoy myself. But it made sense that they did that storyline with Owen and Brett, and it sort of planted the seed for Owen to turn heel and work against Brett, and that was a great program they had, and it did so much for both their careers. Yeah, there were some special family moments, right, that you guys got in WWE, right? There's there was obviously that, right, the '93 Survivor Series, right, the SummerSlam in England with Davey Boy and Brett, with Diana. Then there's then years later there was the Calgary Stampede in your house event there in Calgary. Summer of '97, and
such an amazing moment,
just incredible.
It was. Oh man, it was. We're right here. That storyline of Brett being the face in Canada, the heel in America, really hit home, because during that, and the whole family getting to come in the ring at the end of the show and celebrate.
It was incredible. I mean, it kind of reunited Davey Boy with the family, because he was married to Diana, and Owen and Brett were a team again, and Brian Pillman was kind of reunited with the family again, because he had tag teamed with Bruce for so many years, and Bruce had a small part of that too as well, as he was attacking Stone Cold during the match, right, outside the ring. So but just to see all the grandchildren come into the ring and celebrate their family's victory, it was just incredible.
It was
atmosphere, and it was probably one of the most memorable pay-per-views the WWE ever had. And sadly, it was the last time that a lot of them were together on a major pay-per-view. It was only a few months after that Montreal Screwjob took place, and then everything kind of fell apart there. But there was it was a very special, surreal moment, and it's just too bad they didn't keep that going for another year or two, because it was just incredible chemistry at the time. And they, like you said, they were hated in the United States but loved in Canada, and it was a great Canada versus US feud, and there's just so much potential there, for Brett to extend his rivalry with Steve Austin, and Owen and Davey Boy had been tag team champions, and and they brought Jim Neidhart back as well, and there's just a lot of opportunities there, and it was all kind of cut short with what happened in Montreal 4 or 5 months later.
Yeah, I think that run prior to the screw job, to me that is some of Brett's best work, where he really got to show that he could do everything. Right, he could do the heel, he could do the face, he could go back and forth, he could walk that line. Because the best heels are the guys that it's like you might hate them, but you can also kind of see their side of it a little bit. And Brett was so good with walking that line and keeping that, and keeping that. Man, it was just it was a magic time, and that like you said, that pay-per-view was such a magic, one of the best pay-per-views in my mind ever. And Brett has always said, I mentioned this to you earlier, that you have this incredible knowledge of the wrestling business, and that you've kind of been the Hart family historian. Has that side of wrestling, the history side, I mean, like you mentioned, you're a teacher. So has that history side of wrestling always interested you from that research, that knowledge side?
Yeah, and I don't know where it comes from. I think when I was really little, when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, I just started to learn to read. I used to read the programs all the time. I was so engaged with the wrestlers, right? So, it was even before I could watch it on TV, and I would love to watch, look at the pictures, of the programs. And for me, it was so exciting every week when my parents would pick up the programs, for all of the shows for the entire week, and I'd get to unwrap it and pull a program out and read all the text for it, and the storylines and the different articles and the rivalries and who was fighting who, and then looking at the card itself, and I kind of that's how I learned how to read, and then from that I just I think I read so much it just became ingrained in my memory, and then I just had a instant memory, I have sort of a photographic memory of what's happened over the years, and it, it might have been originally Stampede, but now it's sort of evolved with all the wrestling promotions, and I have a pretty good cross section of WWF and AWA and all the territories, Japan, even what was happening in Germany and UK and South Africa and Mexico to an extent, but and I kind of followed the careers of different wrestlers, and and just from reading that so much, I just sort of became a glue for knowledge.
Yeah, I imagine it's much like, I mean, that's how stories and books used to be told, right? They would be these daily or weekly installments, like in the newspaper and stuff, and it's kind of the same, right? When you got to pull these programs and you were reading some of the latest angles, it's almost like, oh, what's the next chapter in these stories and these angles, and even though you weren't aware that that term, maybe not that terminology at the time, it's almost like this fairy tale story of these bigger than life guys, and it's pretty fascinating.
And I think my experiences growing up in the house and being so close to what was going on with wrestling, I naturally had that fascination with all these wrestlers, the Stomper, Abdullah, the Butcher, guys like Billy Robinson, you idolize these guys, you look up to them, and they're major celebrities, they're great athletes, and then you kind of develop your own special relationships with them because you get to meet them one-to-one or personally. So naturally, I just kind of followed their careers, and even wrestlers that came and went from Stampede, I followed their careers and what they're doing in other promotions and territories. And, I always had a pretty good knowledge of, the successes and triumphs of most of the names, who got started maybe with Stampede and then went on to become bigger stars in other promotions and territories. And, I've always had kind of a second life with wrestling, even though it's pretty removed from school teaching and everyday life, but I don't follow it quite as much now, but I still do to an extent, and I think it's still a very hot industry right now, and you know, I still enjoy it, but I really enjoy the glory days of the 60s and 70s and 80s, you know, and the real classic period that we went through with the Funks and Harley Race and you know, Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody, and you know, and more of the darker hardcore stars like the Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher, and you know, I used to get all these programs from different promotions, right? So I always had a pulse of what was going on. We used to get programs from the Detroit shows, you know, from the Cobo Arena, you know, and they had like a 15-page program that came out, you know, which was great. And then I would get the New York programs from the Madison Square Gardens, and then the Olympic Auditorium in LA, and you know, so it was to me such a big thrill when I got to read those, you know, and just follow the you know, the careers, you know, and the successes of these larger than life stars.
And man, Stampede has always been such a fascinating territory for me, because when I first got into tape trading, Stampede was like one of the first. That was one of the first territories I wanted to get tapes of. Right when I was reaching out to guys through some of the dirt sheets and different things, trying to get, you know, I wanted Stampede. I wanted to see Stampede. You know, I saw guys like the Hart Foundation and the Bulldogs, and I wanted to see where they came from and different things. And I always will say that Stampede has such an impact on modern wrestling, because it melded this North American style with a little bit of lucha libre and some of the European style, to form this kind of this catch, hard hitting style, you know, with strong style type, this big melding pot, which is kind of modern wrestling. And some of that, I think a lot of it really originated in Stampede. That was kind of the first. Even, you know, no one could argue the impact that, you know, obviously Brett had, but you know, but guys like Dynamite Kid, those guys weren't just talented; they changed wrestling. They changed the direction of professional wrestling, and that's because of you know, the openness of your dad and the vision of guys like Bruce and stuff like that. And Stampede was so impactful on changing kind of the course of professional wrestling, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it was just such a melting pot of different styles from all over the world. You know, we had a Japanese influence, we had a British influence, we definitely had a distinct Western Canadian style, and then you know, a bit of lucha libre, and you know, some of the American influences as well, and all kind of melted into one, you know, and it was great, you know, because everybody looked distinct or unique. You know, nobody did the same things, and that's sort of a big criticism I have now of WWE. You know, a lot of guys go through NXT, and when you see them in the ring, they all do the same things. They do the same reversals, the same stuff off the top ropes. You know, the same covers, everything that's been taught in NXT, and they're well trained. They're great, but everybody looks the same. Nobody stands out. Nobody looks unique or has a style of their own.
Yeah. And I think Stampede was also one of the first to open the door for kind of smaller guys, lighter guys like Brett, like Dynamite, like Davey, right? It's always been this muscle bound thing, and these, you know, big, and you know, and Stampede had, you know, some of those guys obviously, but then a guy like Dynamite and Brett and stuff come along, and they're so talented, you can't ignore them. And it kind of changed, like I said, changed the direction a little bit. And like you said, I mean, obviously, you know, the business is very different today. But I still feel like, man, I feel like Stampede had, you know, such an, you know, there's lots of different things, but I feel like Stampede had such an impact on changing the direction. You know, I mean, even got, you know, guys, you know, like I said, like Dynamite, like Chris Benoit, like your brother Brett, these guys impacted wrestling, and Owen impacted wrestling, and they came through Stampede. They came from Stampede. So it's, you know, I don't think you can undermine. I mean, obviously everybody knows the impact of the Hart family individually in the you know, all you brothers and everything else. But as a consensus, as a promotion, you know, Stampede changed the direction of wrestling by opening a lot of doors for these guys. And you know, with Stampede, it was exciting and it's fresh. And now, like you said, now everybody wants to do it. So it's kind of like no one stands out.
No, exactly. And, and the true testament to that, Dave, is that all of the stars who went from Stampede to Japan or Europe, maybe wrestled the tournaments in Germany or in the UK, or went to Mexico or South Africa or WWE or WCW or any of the other territories from Portland to Memphis to Florida to Texas. They all did well, but they learned their craft. They learned their craft with Stampede, and they just took that with them, and all became proven, established stars everywhere else they went.
Yeah, and we didn't even mention, some guys like that came through, like the Jake Roberts, the Junkyard Dog. Some of these guys that came through and really found their footing there. That's not even to mention the guys that stayed kind of, in Canada, the Leo Burks, the Dan Crofts. I mean, they're great in their own right. It's just Stampede is such a remarkable. It's always a fun territory to watch, no matter when you pick from, whatever years. I mean, you can go back, when your dad was active, and all the way up to the Pillman Minwall stuff. It's always entertaining. It's always really cutting edge, and it never got stale, right? Like I said, I grew up in Indiana, right, with Dick the Bruiser, and don't get me wrong, I love Dick the Bruiser. I love the WWA, but there was a time when everybody was 50 something, and it was the same guys that had been there for 3 decades. Yeah. And that didn't happen in Stampede. It was always fresh talent, and it was always exciting, and it's
it was great. And even though we turned over a lot of stars, and some went on to maybe some bigger and better things like Jake Roberts and Junkyard Dog when they both left here in '79, we always replaced them with somebody else. New stars came, from UK or Japan, and everybody learned from each other. There was always, it was always competitive. Guys all wanted to be pushed, and be used well on the card, so they had to work hard, to compete with other wrestlers, right? Because the guys that got pushed were the ones that were obviously having the best matches and getting over the best, but it was such a international style, and everybody could work with everybody. You would learn so much working with veterans like Hito and Sakurada and Leo Burke and Rotten Ron Starr. Some of them, these were proven, established workers, and you could only get better working with them 6-7 nights a week, and we were a full-time territory. We ran 6, sometimes 7 days a week. So, guys just got better and better with more experience.
Yeah. And as we close out, one last thing I want to touch on. The one thing though that a lot of people talk about with Stampede, and I just want to hear it from you, is the travel, right? How tough those roads were to make the towns, right? Because it's you're talking Western Canada. That's there's some frigid travel.
Oh, yeah.
What's that like? You hear these stories of a lot of you guys travel, piling in vans and making these trips. That had to be taxing.
Yeah. Long travel. Sometimes just endless miles and miles, of flat land. And some remote areas of the prairies, right? And then sometimes going to a lot of the Indian reservations and smaller remote areas where the roads weren't very good. And, it was the kind of long, endless travel. And yet on those trips, it's sort of where you bonded with these wrestlers. And
yeah, sure.
You develop friendships with them, and you spent a lot of time, and they're kind of like your families too, so, but certainly a lot of travel, sometimes 8-9 hour trips. It was a grinding schedule, and cold weather sometimes, and these poor vans that we had, they could only run for so long, and then eventually they would they could only go through so much abuse and high speed trips, and a lot of wear and tear, and it was pretty challenging sometimes making these long trips and severe road conditions, severe weather. And yet, we did it for 30, 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's just the nature of, right, the Canadian geography, right? I mean, it's hard for kind of some of us here in America because you drive 20 miles and you hit another town. That Canada is not quite like that sometimes, and it's
Nope.
Just the nature of the beast. And,
and sometimes we had to kind of expand our promotion to more remote and far areas, where we hadn't gone, because you can only hit the same city so many times, and you'd kind of lose your appeal there, because you've already appeared there 3-4 times a year, right? It's just like a concert, right, or a stage show. If you've already seen it, even with a different cast 3-4 times, kind of loses its appeal, right? So we had to run in these remote areas, sometimes far away places and Indian reservations, and but sometimes working with really good organizations, like high schools and community centers and boys and girls clubs and Lions clubs, and they would promote the hell out of these shows. And and it was back when postering and TV ads and newspaper ads, and if you're lucky to get a live radio or TV interview to put over the show beforehand, we could draw tremendously. Sometimes we had bigger crowds in some of those smaller remote areas where there was no competition. There was no major league entertainment. They had no sports franchises. They had no CFL. They had no NHL. Maybe maybe junior hockey or something like that, and that was about it. We had to kind of go to those far remote locations, to draw, and to kind of make some money to cover our expenses for travel and TV production, and whatever we were paying wrestlers. So we had to go to those far remote locations, just to kind of branch out and expand our promotion to other areas.
Yeah, it's modern fans that are not familiar with some of the territory type style. It's kind of the opposite right now. It's everything builds towards the whatever, the pay-per-views or the premium live events or whatever. And the TV back then, it was the TV was a commercial to try to draw people to the house shows. That's where you made your money.
Yeah.
And it's kind of opposite. And it's a whole different beast that it used to be. And it's fascinating. I love digging into how, that stuff, how that it worked, right? In the promotion and like you said, the newspaper ads and everything. It's fascinating how the system worked, right? With the bicycling of tapes and the ads. And it was like a machine that just ran these loops and it worked for decades. And it's crazy.
Yeah. We've certainly evolved now, into the electronic and social media period. And, and it's, I think it's harder for smaller promoters than ever, to exist, right? Because, you can't really compete with the larger organizations, and yet smaller promotions are going to produce, they're going to develop a lot of these stars, and give them their opportunity to break in and establish themselves before they even try out with NXT or, in any other schools, or developmental promotions, so hopefully the smaller independent promotions don't die out, because they serve a critical need, in developing a lot of this talent and giving them that exposure and opportunity to break in.
Yeah. And I mean, and again, so much of wrestling is the reps, right? You got to get out there and do it again and again and again to really get down. And a lot of these guys don't get that time, right? They don't get work in the little places, the little high school gyms in front of crowds, just to just to get that ring time. And, and hopefully maybe some of that circles back and, we find something to help get these guys some time. I mean, it's just a different business. It's a different business, I guess. And
it really is, and something like NXT, they should maybe take it on the road, and maybe
I think they're trying to find ways, I guess.
Some smaller regional territories, and then draw talent from some of those areas. It'd be a really great scouting area, to get new prospects right now. Because now, it's everybody having to go to NXT in Florida, and there's nothing really else. I don't think AEW has a training school of any kind, not that I know of. But
nope.
I think something like that could serve a real purpose, in developing local interest in some of the smaller regional areas, and definitely, I think there'd be a lot of interest from younger guys aspiring, trying to break in, if they got that opportunity to wrestle on a developmental promotion that maybe came through once or twice a year or something. But I don't know, with the logistics, that's possible, but I could see a lot of benefits from it.
There's lots of, and I think we need to bring back characters, right? We need to bring back where everybody doesn't look the same. Everybody doesn't work the same. Let's bring back some big guys, some giants, some, overweight guys, some hairy guys. Let's be a little more diverse with our looks, and where everybody doesn't look the same. And
no, I agree. It's variety is definitely the key there.
Yeah. But I guess it's easy to armchair quarterback. And but Ross, it has been a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope that we can talk again. Well, we'll
absolutely, Dave.
Find some specific things.
Great to be on your show, and I'm really impressed with your knowledge and background. You've obviously researched a lot, and you have a great grasp of what's happened historically in the business and the future trends that we're heading toward. You're very knowledgeable.
Thank you.
I'm impressed with how much you know. So,
thank you.
On your show.
Yeah, and again, I hope maybe we can bring you back and we can dive into maybe it's just a specific topic or an event or something and really dive deep into that. But before I let you go, just do you have a way that for fans to follow you on social media if they want to keep track of what Ross Hart's doing, or do you kind of keep to yourself?
I'm on Facebook. I don't have a chance to friend everybody, but I am on Facebook and what was formerly Twitter, I guess. And you can reach me there for sure, and just drop me a line, maybe that you had heard me in one of these podcasts like I've done with yours, and I'll certainly try and get back to those fans. But I enjoy hearing comments and perspectives from everybody in the industry.
Yeah. And if anybody has anything they want to ask, they can always also pass it along to me, and I'll pass it along to you, and we'll go from there. But like I said, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. I feel like you and I could just talk for hours and just chit chat and exchange stories and reminisce. And like I said, I hope to have you on again in the future and talk some more and dive a little deeper into some topics, because like I said, I'm a huge fan of yours and your family and Stampede Wrestling, and it's fascinating to me to talk history. And I appreciate you, Ross, giving me the time and talking to me today.
It was a pleasure, Dave. I really enjoyed myself. All the best to you and your listeners.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ross. And like I said, we'll stay in touch and hopefully talk again in the future.
Yes, sir.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Pro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Pro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guides for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews. Sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com. And to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out in the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen if you know what's good for you.
Okay, and welcome back. Thank you to Ross Hart for coming on and being my guest. I will probably have him on much more in the future. Maybe even giving us some insight on some of that Calgary 88 stuff that we will be covering. Ross is just a treasure trove of historical information, and I look forward to talking with him again. Guys, go make sure you follow me on social media. I'm on pretty much any social media platform. Just go and look up Nostalgic Dave Dynasty or look up The Dave Dynasty, and you'll probably find me there. Also, go check out all of the WrestleCopia networks of podcasts. You can look them up individually by name or go to WrestleCopia.com now. You especially want to make sure you go and subscribe to the Regional Wrestling Podcast. They've got several great shows that you should be listening to already. But coming in 2025, Ray Russell and myself will be doing more WWA episodes. So go subscribe to that now so that when those come out in the new year, you don't miss anything. And in the meantime, just enjoy the other shows that are on there. There are some great, great shows that you should be listening to. Also, be sure to go check out my friends at the Ultimate Classic Wrestling Library at classicwrestling.net or download the Ultimate Classic Wrestling app on all your devices. As you heard earlier, go check out my friends at Filsinger Games. That's another option if you're looking for a gift for the wrestling fan on your shopping list. Go to filsingergames.com and buy them a set now. Next week, my guest here on the show will be Sam Adonis. We talk about his brother, Corey Graves, Lucha Libre, of course, him being the most hated man in Mexico, and much, much more. Sam is another treasure trove of historical wrestling information, and it was so much fun to talk to him. So you should be looking forward to that episode and that interview next week. Thank you to all of you, all the listeners, supporters, everything, for all your follows, your interactions, your downloads, your shares, your comments, everything you give me. Thank you for all that. That helps keep the podcast thriving and growing, and it is much appreciated. All right, I'm going to get out of here on this episode. Make sure you tune in again next week when I have my guest, Sam Adonis. But until then, wherever you go and whatever you do, be good, be safe, and always keep on growing.
Fans, we brought you All-Star Championship Wrestling This is Sam Maneker thanking you for being with us and saying until next time, so long, everyone.